Happy Tuesday, everyone. I am so glad you're here. I'm your host, Ellie B, and thank you so much for joining me on the Share Your Story podcast. We're back for part 2 of my conversation with my Aunt Laura. Last week, Laura shared so much of her story of growing up and coming to faith and what those first few years of following God looked like. It was so fun for me to hear and to live through some of those memories again with my mom. And if you haven't listened yet, I highly recommend you go back and listen to part 1. Today's episode wades a lot further into the deep end of our experience and walking alongside my mom in her battle with cancer, as well as what our grieving experiences were like after my mom went home to heaven. It's definitely heavy, so I'd encourage you to have some time and space to really listen. You'll hear me say it, but I'm indescribably grateful for my Aunt Laura during this time. We had such an incredible community of people around us during this season, but she was my go-to teammate on the exceedingly good and excruciatingly hard days. You'll hear so many of those moments today, so let's jump right back in where we left off with Laura Meeks. Whatsoever.
Her story is special.
Her story
because she was so faithful and
exactly
surrendered and such a light to so many.
Yeah.
I just remember thinking, okay, well, but he's going to heal her because he
Right.
can't take her. She's too important in his kingdom on earth, you know.
You and I finished the story, I would say, more than anyone, because I would say in a lot of ways, I think my mom was a pioneer in things because like y'all said, like your family relationships were so strong somewhat because of dysfunction. And I feel like my mom was one of the first that kept being like, okay, but we want it to be functional. We want it to be functional, and kind of going first a little bit in the like, let me lay it all out there. How do I trust the Lord? And
oh, for sure.
You know, like I think she was such a pioneer in so many of those things. So when it came to, okay, but the pioneer who's leading all these people doesn't get
You're not
sick.
taking them early.
Yeah.
Right. Doesn't get sick.
No, there's just no way.
Or if she gets sick, oh, you're going to raise her up like Lazarus.
Yeah.
Like you're certainly not taking her home.
Which was the scripture we got. But I remember kind of that first, my mom and I just had such a sense that it was something serious when she started getting that cough and was like getting exploratory stuff done. And I remember being in Highlands at Alex and Sydney's wedding and looking at you and Madeline being like, no, I'm scared. I think this is serious. I think this is serious. And I think everyone was just like, no. And even if it is, it's going to be quick. It's going to be, we had such this idea of like, oh, we know how the story's going to go kind of thing. And also probably it was just a lot of fear.
Yeah. My heart's really going boom, 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 just thinking about it.
I know. And then she was diagnosed, and I think it was so crazy because she got so sick so fast.
Mm.
And there was like, well, because she also had like that flu or something like right when she was diagnosed. And I think we all just went into panic, but it was all laced also through so much faith and so much that she had taught us. But it was like, it had to come into action.
She's the one, well, the Lord through her, but she's the one who prepared us all for exactly what she was going to walk through, what we were going to walk through.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget having a Bible study with my friends, and Jane had told me to watch this series about this pastor whose 5-year-old daughter had cancer.
Yeah.
And we ended up losing her. And the whole series, it's from when she gets diagnosed, and then the last part of the series is she's in hospice and she's going home. And it rips your heart. But it is the most powerful thing I think I've ever heard. Yeah. And I wanted my Bible study to hear it. And this is before your mom was sick. And I was like, oh my gosh, Jane, this is the most amazing thing. I can't wait for my Bible study to hear it. So I shared it with everybody. And one of my sweet friends said, months later after Jane got sick, she said, I can't quit thinking about when you shared that Bible study with us. She said, I thought God was preparing me because one of my loved ones was going to get sick. And she said, and it turns out he was preparing you. And I was like, yeah. Yeah.
Take it back. I don't want to know that.
Who knew? But I think that that teaching completely equipped me and Jane, and we did it together.
Yeah.
Because, that man went through what he went through, losing his baby girl, and to listen to someone who's walking through it.
Yeah.
And I just remember when your mom was deep into treatment and it was tough, and we would look at each other and we'd say, but we know that everything God does is good and perfect. So no matter what he does in this, we can trust him.
Right.
And we were so secured in it. It really felt like an anchor. Like we were unshakable.
Yes.
And I remember thinking, I don't even know how I got here.
I don't have that myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because I would say I also tend towards more of and my mom was a little bit this way too, of just like anxious or fearful of a lot of things. And it was when she was diagnosed, I was so thankful because you and I felt like partners in crime in a lot of it, and just aligned and walking through so much of it. But there was this strength that can only be given from him, because I certainly didn't have it on my own, but it was this crazy juxtaposition of there was so much that felt so full in my life, and so much that I was like so clinging to him with everything I had. And it wasn't even, we mentioned us writing the end of the story. Like, surely she's not going to be taken from us. Surely she's going to live to tell this story, and it's going to be huge next part of her testimony. It's going to bring all these people to Christ. It was also him speaking to us through dreams, through scriptures,
incredible season,
and through other people's testimonies and stories. We prayed with so many people. Do you remember the clicking when that man laid hands on her brain? Like, there was so much that we walked through together. And I think the gift of growing up alongside my mom is I had a lot of depth into understanding he communicates with us in so many ways, and trust his voice. And it doesn't matter what's said in this appointment, what he says is true. And so much of that was being confirmed, but it also was, I think Merritt Britt is that the pastor, right? The Merricks. Yeah. And it was so also y'all's foundation of, I didn't have the part that was, he's always good. He's always good. He's always good.
Completely prepared me. Completely.
And I think we each like relied on each other in different ways because I would say wholeheartedly, it was my greatest fear that I would lose my mom.
Yeah. And Jane and I were so codependent.
Yeah.
On each other. And I remember her saying to me one time, way before she was sick, I think we have an unhealthy attachment to each other. Like not unhealthy in a bad way, but like a ungodly way. Like there is an attachment, and then there's something that's beyond what God can kind of work through.
Or just not that he can't work through it. He wants to set you free from it.
Because
he wants to be at the center.
Yes. And Jane and I were at each other's center, I think. And I remember her saying, she was always, so far ahead of me, and she would teach me things. But when she'd say them at first, I'd be like, what?
Offended.
Again, anger. I don't understand. No. So she said, we just need to cut soul ties. And I was like, what does that mean? I'm not cutting my soul tie with you. And she was like, it's not what you think. It's really just.
Oh, she told me the same thing.
And I was between us so that, anyway, it's kind of hard to explain.
No, but
I was I was so angry.
She told me the same thing. And I was like, you don't want to be close to me? Yeah. Oh, she told me the same thing. And I was like, so you don't want to be this close to me anymore? What do you mean? Like, I was like, no, we are this close. What are we supposed to do to help it? You don't want to be this close with me anymore? I was mad.
But I will say, I think, I know. And it's one of those things that's hard to put to words, but I know that that was the Lord doing that, because losing Jane had we not done that, which is only really something you can understand in the spirit realm. It's not a physical thing.
Right.
Not an emotional thing. It's a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
And it's too tight for God to be in the middle of. So it has to be cut. And it's something you can really only understand if you understand that. It's
concept.
Just hard to explain. But I do know and believe that was necessary, or I might be curled up in the fetal position every day after losing Jane.
Yeah.
And because of what the Lord did to prepare us all.
Right.
That cutting that free without me even really understanding what that meant made me able to exist without her.
Yeah.
Because our attachment was so deep.
Yeah.
So deep.
Yeah.
And I remember one time when she was sick, there with the couple from Papua New Guinea was praying.
Yeah. Margaret and Jim. We love them.
And they went, Margaret, Jim, Margaret. Oh, but they were praying over us, and they went to start praying over us together. And they lifted their heads and they looked at each other and they looked at Jane and they looked at me and they said, "Wow, you two are really connected." And this is after the soul tie cut, I might say. But we just smiled at each other, and he said, "The Lord is teaching you two the exact same thing at the exact same time."
Yeah.
And we just kind of looked at each other like, we know. But of course.
Done solidified. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember that prayer time. I love them. They're the sweetest. Yeah, I think there was a lot that was, I think looking back on it, we were being taught different lessons that we couldn't handle, similar to what we said. Like, he teaches us one thing to prepare us for the next. But there was so much confidence, really. Like, I remember, because you would come for so many important appointments and just be present, which was so helpful. That, I mean, I lived here, so that helped that I could be around. But I remember sitting in some of those appointments, and we'd really pray before, and we'd because the treatments themselves, like, my mom would come into appointments and they'd be like, "This is some of the most lethal combination of drugs we can give you." Yeah. And how do you still have a smile on your face, or how do you still look as good as you do? And those things. And I remember being in one appointment where that doctor was, the stuff she was saying, we
kind of like the devil himself.
Yeah. We stared at each other like,
in disbelief.
There's no way. There's no way.
She was so cold. And she was so cold.
Yeah.
And
we got in the car, I remember, and just all
fell apart
and drove home in silence. But I remember
Do you remember being in a living room and getting in a huddle?
Well,
like
that's what I was just about to say. Yeah.
Right, team.
Exactly.
It's not about what they say. It's about what God says.
Yeah, I remember that because it was awful. I mean,
and in an instant we were laughing and talking, and we just went on with our day like it never happened.
Yeah,
including Jane.
Yeah, because the weightiness of it was so intense. But we walked through the door and said, "We're not going to live under this. This is not what we've been told. This is not." And we did. We cut ourselves free. We were able to laugh and enjoy and not. I mean,
carry
it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The Lord was mind-boggling through that whole process.
Yeah.
I mean, and when we didn't get the miracle, we were such in a state of shock. And I think unless you had been, I left my life behind to go be with her.
Right. Because I think it was, again, you and I were so in that place, and I don't know why I say this over and over and over again. I'm sure it's fresh, annoying, but like, we were so convinced, not just out of our own stuff, out of our own desire for her to be healed, but there was so much from so many people, communities in Athens and people in Florida, people from all over that just were like, "No, I got a vision today that she would be healed." There were just all these confirmations and big things, or even like, I remember asking and calling on the elders at church to pray, and the song that came on, like, right as they started to play was, It's Your Breath in Our Lungs, which is so, like she was dealing with lung cancer. There was just
There's a
so
scripture that says, "You're the
Yeah.
air in my lungs," or
Yeah.
that we used to pray.
Yeah, so there were so many that I think when I called you and I was like, it's getting way
Way
worse.
worse, and I remember
And
and I remember looking at Craig and saying, "I gotta go."
yeah, but I'll
And
be
he's
back.
like, "Why?" I remember thinking I didn't say I just said, I don't know when I'll
Yeah,
be back." And he was like, precious. He was
yeah,
so precious.
yeah,
And I took the dog,
yep.
and I remember thinking that, Stuart's not gonna be happy I'm bringing my dog, but I'm gonna ask for forgiveness instead of permission because I cannot leave indefinitely and not have my dog. She
Yeah,
was like my little
yeah.
and, 5 weeks later I stayed 5 weeks.
I was gonna
The
ask
6th
you.
week was the 6th week was planning the memorial and all that.
Yeah,
I was there 5 weeks, but, and then the girls came,
yeah,
and but I just remember being so sure the miracle was coming still.
right. And those were long, torturous days because so much of it was honestly watching her disappear
Mhm.
and hoping against all
Mhm.
hope, believing against all but we shared responsibilities, we shared time, and then it was where one was falling and faltering, the other was rising up in faith, and so we just,
Yes,
you
and
know
he so beautifully brought Ruthie in.
Yeah,
Um, she had a trip to Italy, I remember,
yeah,
and she was like, "I don't know what to do." And I said, you need to go." Like, it's so
because we were so
yeah,
confident.
well, A, we were so
Yeah,
convinced she was gonna be healed, and B, it was I mean, what I just really did believe I really thought she needed to go, and so did Jane. Jane would want her to go,
yeah,
and they got back in plenty of time,
right.
but I remember calling her and saying, "I think I need you." Like,
Yeah,
and she came right away.
yeah,
Um, but in the very end, it's like, here are the 3 sisters again, and Ruthie and I are sharing a room,
yeah,
and, um, I had the little routine with your dad, and he would come get me
yeah,
early in the morning,
yeah,
and because he needed to go let the dog out and open the house up kinda thing, set up the tea and the ice
yeah,
bucket, and, um, I would go get in the bed with Jane, and
yeah,
we would hold hands,
yeah,
and I would go back to sleep, and she would
mhm,
just sleep, and, um, he came and got me, but he was kind of frantic, and so I went in to do my little time with her, but oh, well, yeah, I don't wanna go into it, but she was, doing that breathing
yeah,
thing, and I know what that meant because I watched my dad go through it when I lost my daddy, and I just remember thinking, I can't do this." And I had been a rock, like,
yeah,
literally,
yeah,
and I can say I'd been a rock because the Lord was being a rock for me.
right,
It was not
right,
me, but I had been unshakable for the most part, and I thought, there is no way." And I went and got Ruthie, but I remember feeling so bad, and she was like, "Laura," she grabbed me, and she
yeah,
was like, "You it's okay, you can't." I said, "I can't handle this." And she's
yeah,
like, "And I can."
yeah,
She's like, "Go back to bed. Just go back to bed. I'll
yeah,
come get you if I need anything."
yeah,
And I was like, "Okay." It was so dear, and I went back
yeah.
to bed,
She's
and
so
Ruthie
well
went in
equipped
there.
for that. Yeah,
It was so such a beautiful thing
yeah,
that the Lord did. Um, and then Ruthie came back in and said, "She's gone. Wake up. She's gone."
yeah.
And I remember having to go knock on y'all's door. Like
Well,
like,
I
"Are you kidding me?"
I think I was in there because I had a dream the night before, and it actually been, I think, through you and through Trisha, those couple of days that it was just getting so much worse, but we were still believing, and, um, I just remember, I think it was you and it was Trisha. You were like, "I think there's this place similar to that soul tide, like, where you gotta let go. You're holding on to something, and God's gotta be the one to do it." And, I remember getting in the car driving to the river because that's what Janie Jenkins and my mom always said, "Go to the water, go to the water." And I called Trisha and I was like, "I don't understand. I don't know how to let go. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and I know this is what he's told me." And that feels like being unfaithful to not believe because there were people that were telling us, like, "You're crazy. This is clearly the
Oh,
direction
yeah.
it's
I think the whole
going."
rest of the family thought we were
Yeah. I mean, the
it
girls,
looks
like
crazy.
yeah,
It really does look
it
crazy.
does, it
It's hard
does,
to
it
think.
does. Yeah, and, I remember her walking me through a prayer of just, like, letting go, and I came back and I did the same thing where I just went and I read the word, I held my mom's hand, and I just really prayed through it, and it was that night that I had a dream that, like, I could not sleep. I was restless the whole night, and I knew for some reason, something in my spirit was saying that it's you
Not
gotta let
good.
go. Yeah, you gotta let go, and it was but I remember I was in there, but I remember looking at each other and being like, "He can still do it."
Oh, yeah.
I texted Kelsey, I texted, I think Bryce, maybe, I know I texted Kelsey, and I said, "She's gone, but I believe he still can." Because we were so, like, and in shock, complete shock. We never thought that would happen.
I'll
Never.
never forget having to look at you and Mary Claire in the eyes when we walked out of the room. I will never forget it. I just
Yeah.
remember the only reason I could stand was because the Lord literally
Held you.
took over.
Yeah.
Took over.
Yeah.
Took over. And I just remember feeling so calm, and I was completely 100% peaceful, but in such a state of shock.
Yeah.
But, um, but I do remember, like, probably that whole horrible week leading up to that, saying, "Lord, just end it. Either heal her or
Yeah.
take her
Yeah.
home, but
Right.
please end this. Like,
Yeah.
just end it one way or the
Right.
other. Whatever you're gonna do, you're gonna do."
Because it was
Oh
torture.
god. So I was so thankful. There was a
Yeah.
part of me that was so
Relieved.
relieved because I knew exactly I could just picture Jane's face,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
over. And not only
Yeah.
was it over, it was glorious for her.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and I that was the longest day of my life just because
Yeah.
I had her 2 daughters in front of me going I just remember you looking at me and going, "What are we supposed to do?" And Mary Claire looked at me and said, "We don't know what to do." And I
Yeah.
didn't know what to say. It was
Right.
probably the worst day of my life. Well,
Yeah.
certainly most worst day of my life.
Yeah.
Um, but the Lord completely took over
Yeah.
and stayed over me
Yeah.
for weeks, I feel like.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember, like, months later thinking the horror of it all, and I didn't really let myself acknowledge the horror of so much of it.
Right.
Um, and saying, "You know what, Lord?" You feel distant all of a sudden because I think we walked so
We did.
he was
I
so
had that
near,
same
and
experience.
I
Yeah.
was like, "Where are you?" Like,
Yeah.
for some reason, I feel like you've left the
Yeah.
room
Yeah.
with me, and it went on for months and months, and I was like, you know, because I said to him, "I never once got mad at you. I
Yeah.
never once left you. I never once gave up faith. I never once doubted your goodness, your
Yeah.
plan, and I'm like, "Where are you?" I
Yeah.
just and I remember I kept saying, "I just need, like, a hug from you. I need to hear
Yeah.
you say,
I'm here.
'I'm here. Well done.
Yeah.
Good,'" and and it just stayed quiet, and I thought, "What in the world?" And I'll never forget, it was probably 6 months later, I don't even know, maybe longer than that, and I was at my friend's lake house and we were having quiet time and just reading the Bible and listening to worship music, and I remember just sitting there thinking, "I just want to feel like you're hugging me." And I was sitting there listening to worship music, and when I went I have to go backwards. When I left for Jacksonville for the indefinite amount of time, I only packed one little suitcase. Like, I had no clothes. I just kept wearing the
Yeah.
same thing over and over and over. Um, and I remember I had these white cotton shorts and a lilac blouse, that I wore, every other day. And I was sitting there at the lake house having this quiet time, and all of a sudden, all I could see was his big arm around me, and I was in that outfit. Like, that's what I had on in the vision, and I was curled up like a child taking a nap on their daddy's lap,
Yeah.
And I was curled up, and he said, and his other hand was out forward, like he was doing something with his right hand, and I was curled up in his left arm. And he said so clearly, "I'm the one who's doing all this." Meaning, like, remember I said I felt like I was an autopilot, but I was at complete peace? And he said, "And I have had you in a perpetual hug since it started."
Wow.
And the word perpetual stuck out of my head so much. I was like, and it was just such a beautiful word, because I went and, like, looked at the dictionary, translation of perpetual, and it's unending, And I thought, wow. Like, I felt like he had walked away, but I'd never left his arms, and everything that I was able to do in walking this out, he was showing me, like, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
You're here and I'm doing it.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah. Did you
Brutal,
feel like,
but incredible.
Right. How did you feel like your relationship with the Lord changed in the actually losing her versus?
I remember feeling genuinely, deeply joyful for Jane. Like that was the saving grace, is that I was so happy for Jane.
Yeah.
But all the affirmation we had of the healing, all the dreams, all the prophetic words. I had dreams. Susan Britt had dreams. I had friends that had dreams. You had dreams. My daughters had dreams.
Yeah.
I got my faith got very rocked, not in God, but in the prophetic.
Yeah.
Like, I started thinking,
the extras.
All these other dreams you've given me.
Right.
Like,
so how can I trust
how do I believe in those? Like, and it had been such a profound, powerful part of my journey up until then, because he, as you know, speaks to most of us in our family, all my siblings, both my children, both my nieces, in dreams. And so all of a sudden,
which is also biblical. He has spoken through dreams for ever.
Profound breakthroughs, all kinds of things, warnings, so many things. But all of a sudden, I felt like I couldn't trust that.
Yeah.
And I did. It felt like a huge part of my faith was shaken and gone.
Yeah.
And then I also, like, after that, we had some friends get diagnosed with cancer. We had things happen, and I thought, I don't know that I can believe in a healing. Like, it just wrecked me in that way. It wasn't that I didn't believe he couldn't do it. I just was scared to believe that he would do it, because the answer was,
that's a good way
of
putting it.
With Jane. And we did, and this is where we get these beliefs in our head that are not godly, but I was like, we did everything.
Yeah.
Our faith never wavered.
Right.
So I was very wrecked for about 2 years.
Yeah.
Maybe 3.
Yeah.
On like being able to trust him. Like, we have several friends now that we're praying for a miraculous healing.
Right.
That have cancer. And I'm like, for the first time I feel like, oh, I'm believing, because where I couldn't even go there. I couldn't. And that was hard, because you lose hope in a lot of ways. When you don't have the hope of healing or deliverance or breakthrough, it's like, well, I guess we just I don't know. It was a
it's
huge
daunting. It makes the world feel
void.
scary again, because I think some of the, which it's taught me a lot about what it means to be simply in the Word and know Him for His characteristics. But my big thing was like, I know you can, so why won't you?
Right.
Like, I know you're the healer,
Right.
but you didn't heal. I know you're the deliverer, but you didn't deliver.
Right.
Like, all these things that I was like, this is who you say you are, and you've told me you are. And so I don't understand. And so much of my initial faith, your initial faith, was surrounded on, my mom really became a believer and would say it was so solidified in healing prayer and then having me and Mary Claire.
Right.
And so it was like all these things that were somewhat cornerstones in our family of faith were all of a sudden like, do any of them matter? Do they stand for anything? Can we trust any of it? And so much of it was him inviting me to be like, you can trust me. You can trust my word. And it's not that he doesn't believe all those other, or doesn't still speak to us, but I still struggle with like, I got this vision, or I got this word, or whatever, that I'm like, I want to believe it because I believe there is richness in that and in our faith.
Yeah.
But it's the trusting he's good still at the center of it.
Well, and I feel like he really girded me up in that. That just never wavered with me. And I think one of the places he helped me overcome the fear of trusting in a miracle, in a healing,
right,
in the power of our prayers,
that was a big
power
one.
of our faith.
Yeah.
He said that was Jane's story. Like, that doesn't mean it's your friend's story. That doesn't mean it's just like in the Bible, he didn't heal everybody.
Right.
He only healed the ones, that the Lord told him to. And only the Lord knows why. So it's trusting in his sovereignty, his plan. But do you remember, I was so worried about you because you were so mad at God.
Yeah.
And you couldn't go to understandable. Remember me? I got mad about everything with God. So I understood and my heart was breaking.
Yeah.
So but I remember you couldn't go to church, you couldn't listen to worship music, and it was just such a horrible time. And I just wanted so desperately you to find your way back to him.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, but one time we were talking and you said, I can't go to him. And I said, but Ellie, I understand that you're angry with the Father.
Yeah.
I said, but don't be mad at Jesus.
Yeah.
And you were like, you just kind of looked at me and I said, don't you nobody can be mad at Jesus. And and you were like, well, but Jesus didn't do it. Jesus is the one who healed. And I said, but Jesus only did what the Father told him.
Yeah.
So take it up with the Father, but please don't turn your back on Jesus. Do you remember that?
Oh, vividly.
Yeah, because I remember that came from the Lord because I don't think I'm not that good.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, ooh, wow, he really spoke to her. Because I had an issue with the Father and I didn't know I had.
Yeah.
And I kept going to meet with Jesus in my quiet time visually, and because I'm such a visual person.
Yeah.
And he wasn't there. And I was like, what? I'm so confused.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Is there a back door?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I finally gave up and I was like, well, okay, I'll just listen to some worship music. And I was listening to worship music and I try again to just in my mind, just get there with him.
Yeah.
Still wasn't there. And finally he's there and he says, you're not meeting with me today. And I was like, I'm not? And he was like, your issue is not with me. Your issue is with the Father. And today you're going to meet with the Father. And I was like, I am?
Wow.
It was strong. Yeah. And it was big because I didn't know that I really needed to fess up that deep down there was a part of me that really thought God is cruel. He's a cruel God who lets people suffer terribly. And that had to come out. And and I had such a deep, deep, deep fear of one day suffering terribly.
Yep, we both had that.
Yeah. And he said to me, I I said, he said, what are you so afraid of? And I said, I'm afraid that you're going to make me suffer like Holocaust kind of suffering. Like,
yeah,
I
we
had
both had that.
such a
Yeah.
horrible fear of that. And he said, I have never spoken that over you. And I was like,
yes,
I felt it go away. And I was like, okay, you're right. You haven't. And I said, but I don't know how to make it go away. Like, it was a tormenting fear.
Yeah.
And he said, every time your mind starts to go there, I want you to come here. And I was like on his lap, like a little child in her father's lap.
Yeah.
And it works. Like, when I start to go down that road, I literally will hear his voice say, I never spoke that over you. Every time your mind tries to go there, I want you to come here.
Yeah.
And it's just like, crawling up into your daddy's lap,
Because you're special to him.
Because I'm so special. All his children are special.
Special to him. Special to him. Yes, that's what I mean.
Special to him.
Yeah.
All his children are special to him.
Yeah. I remember that. So vividly.
But because of that lesson, I could help you separate.
Yeah.
And I do remember feeling like, I think that's breakthrough, because I think Ellie will be able to talk to Jesus.
Well, because I could really, that's where I fell in love with podcasts so much, because I could listen to other people talk about, here's how I believe, here's how he delivered, here's how he didn't, and here's where I am, and here's where I was. And that was bolstering my faith that other people had been in a moment of, I believed with everything in me. Now where do I go? Or where's the hope? Or how do I keep going?
Right.
But I could not go to him. So, or I didn't feel like I could. It's not that I couldn't. I didn't feel like I could.
Right.
But I remember that being like, separating that place of, he's still Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and I can go to Jesus, because that's still, he's still the person who feels that compassion.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. He understands.
Yeah.
And the Father can handle our anger, which is what Jane would always tell me.
Oh yeah.
She's like, it's just honest.
Yeah.
If you're angry and you're not facing him with it, you're just hiding it. You think you're hiding it, but he knows it's there.
He knows it anyway.
You might as well just own up to it.
Yeah.
And talk it out.
Yeah. She was so big about, be right where you are, because he can handle it. And that's really the only way forward or through, is to be really right where you are, and that honest with him. Well, more than anything, through all of it, I'm just so thankful he gave us each other, because I really don't know that, I'm just going to cry saying it. He gave really so many people to walk through it, but I think my mom was just so near and dear to each one of us in such unique and beautiful, and same with Mary Claire, same with Madeline and Emma. Like, she had such deep relationships, but there was something that you and I both were like, she's been our lifeline through so many things that I don't think either of us could have done it alone. And to know just like the depths of the love, the faithfulness, and also the sorrow. And to allow each other to remind each other of what my mom would say, or kind of be in those places that was like, we were just so in depth with her, that we could walk through it together, and so much of that. And I'm just really, really, really grateful.
Such a gift.
Yeah.
Such a gift.
And we will definitely have you back to discuss multiple different elements of your story and tell stories and all the above, because you have so many, and also can give such fantastic decorating advice. And there's so much that we need help on, and I'm just really, really grateful. But to wrap up at least this edition of Lala on Share Your Story, Lala, what would you say is the one word that would describe the current chapter of your story?
Joy. Joy.
Yeah.
Like, overwhelming. Like, how, and it's a hard place, because sometimes I'm like, why does my life look like this and Jane's look like that? It's a very hard place for me, because I'm extremely blessed. Yeah. Like, overwhelmingly blessed. Precious, wonderful, loving husband. 2 daughters who I couldn't be more thankful for an amazing son-in-law, a precious baby granddaughter that I'm obsessed with, another one on the way.
Yeah.
A wonderful business that I just am so blessed by. And then I have a friend in it with me now, and that's just an incredible gift.
Right.
And
really good community.
Like, too many blessings to count, literally. And then there's the fear side that goes, "Oh God, the other shoe's gonna drop." But right now I'm overwhelmed by the joy, and a lot of exciting things coming ahead this year. And we love Emma's boyfriend. We have such dear friends. It is my brother and sister. We're just in this new season of life, and it's so very, very sweet. I'm about to be with my sister for a weekend, and just so excited. And my brother's, I've watched him be completely transformed by the Lord, and it is just, I can't get over all the answered prayers, and just seeing you and Mary Claire come through, beauty from ashes. It's just pure joy.
I love that.
Pure joy.
Well, step 1 is done, and we'll have you back.
Love you, Elbell.
Love you so much. Love you so much.
Love you. Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode and wading through the deep with us. We recorded this when Lala was in town for our annual Christmas trip and sat in my bedroom right before heading to lunch with our dear friend Darlene. And we were definitely running late. We really haven't sat back down and revisited those days in such depth one-on-one like that, and it was healing, but also reminds us of so many other stories there are to tell. We probably could have recorded for another 4 hours, so I promise Laura will be back to share more stories on the podcast. I really appreciate all of your support on the podcast so far. Each review, rating, comment on Instagram, and text helps this show grow and encourages me so deeply in the process. I'd love if you would share this show with a friend and join the conversation on the comments on Instagram. You can find links to Laura and everything me and share your story in the show notes of this episode. I can't wait to share more stories with you on Thursday.